Today's edition of the podcast is brought to you by Coach Me Plus. Coach Me Plus is the leader in athlete management software and a product that I've been lucky enough to be using for a little over a year now. Only rivaled by the impeccable customer service that Kevin and his staff provides, Coach Me Plus's ability to constantly be amoeba-like in their ability to mold and matriculate what you're trying to get across and bring together is absolutely fantastic. Their constant pursuit of better ways and better methods and innovations and progress to their own product is absolutely fantastic. Go over to CoachMePlus.com. Check out what they got, guys. It's something that I guarantee you won't be disappointed with. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today, guys, we have a unique conversation with Michigan Tech graduate assistant strength and conditioning coach Jake Jensen. Jake has a very unique and very different path that he's taken to get to work with Matt Tomey up there in the UP. It's really an awesome story and something that we could all learn from. I don't care how long you've been in the field. It's a really awesome talk, guys. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Let's get right to it. Jake, thanks for being with us today, bud.
All right, Coach. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So listen, you've got a really interesting story. Let's start with that, and we can go from there.
Right on. Yeah. So I think honestly, the best way to start the story is with the seminar, with the Virginia seminar. Frankly, the first time, the way I actually heard about the seminar with you and with the rest of the crew out at Richmond is I started working for Mark McLaughlin in 2012. In January, I started volunteering in his, basically it was a shed in a ditch right next to the Willamette River in Oregon, where he was running Performance Training Center, which, for a lot of guys, we wouldn't have it any other way. Just a small gym with barbells and squat racks, nothing fancy. And he was working with several NFL players and a lot of college or high school kids at that gym, and I volunteered with him for about 6 months, mostly just watching and asking questions, and I learned a ton just in the time I was volunteering for him. At that point, he started paying me to work with some of the high school kids, so I was still mostly a volunteer. He was just throwing me a bone because I made it through that first 6 months, and I think about that time, I could be getting my timeline wrong, but it was somewhere around the time I stopped volunteering and started getting a little more responsibility that Patrick Ward, who is currently an employee with the Seahawks, got his job at Nike in Beaverton. He'd moved up from Arizona to work there, and he would come around on Saturdays to mostly talk shop. I think he did some work with athletes there, coaching and helping. But mostly my memory of that time period was learning from Mark, learning from Patrick, and then when they would have their discussions, just mostly being a fly on the wall for them, talking about everything under the sun in terms of sports performance and sports technology, which was amazing. Like, I didn't know it at the time, but that was a pretty unique opportunity to get to listen to those two guys talk about training and talk about technology and manual therapy and things like that. About the same time, I got started in powerlifting, working for Mark. So he was a powerlifter for a while. I think his squat max was like, I think he told me he hit like 700 at one point.
That's
back
awesome.
in the day. So we wanted video evidence. Me and all the other guys were like, we want some proof of this. But I guess he burned the evidence. So to be determined if that actually happened. So.
Well, there aren't many people in the world that I trust more than Mark. So, I mean,
I know, right?
Yeah.
So I believe him. I believe him.
No doubt, right?
Because he really turned over a new leaf, like went completely the opposite direction. Like when I was working there, he was cycling, like he doesn't run, but he cycles, and he was doing like probably 200 miles a week or something ridiculous like that. We had some good times. Yeah, Mark was my first mentor in strength and conditioning, and I honestly, like, working for that guy was one of the biggest blessings of my career, because he gave me the kind of perspective that has helped to shape my interpretation of all my other experiences. Um, Mostly what he gave me was the idea that a lot of the things that you learn are going to be pieces of a bigger whole. So try not to get obsessed with one thing that you learn. Try and expand your mind. And that's kind of illustrated by the first book he told me to read was Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Sapolsky. And that just kind of encompasses his philosophy, is to focus on the bigger picture and what exactly is happening on a global scale with adaptation. So as I was working for Mark, I volunteered at Portland State University for the football team there, which was a good experience that kind of introduced me to the dynamics of working in a college setting. And it was interesting to juxtapose college strength coach with private strength coach. And a lot of people don't get that experience. And that first year and a half of time I spent in strength and conditioning, it was like I got a taste of all of it. So it was nice. It was really nice. I worked at Portland State from like January of 2013 until the middle of 2013 before they started spring ball. And my wife and I, so at that point, our journey in Portland kind of ended. And I think that summer is when I came to my first conference in Virginia. It was 2013.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's when Victor and Val were here. So, yeah, that was the first time he came down.
So I guess the one thing I left out there is that at that point, Mark had kind of given me some advice, and Patrick obviously like seconded this advice. He said that if you're serious about being a strength coach, you need to have some kind of a niche, like something that you do that kind of separates you from the rest of the competition, because it's, as many know, highly competitive. And so I decided to use the Russian that I had learned as a Mormon missionary in Ukraine to try and like create a niche there for myself. Lucky for me, strength and conditioning was invented in Russian in Russia, so
Both.
I was lucky that way. I actually reached out to Yosef after reading a couple of his books, of Anatoly's books, and I asked him if he needed a translator. At that point, I didn't know that Dr. Yesus was like the only guy who does it, but I just shot in the dark. I sent him an email and I was like, hey, this is who I am. If you need a translator, let me know. I'm happy to help. And that kind of started a chain of events that would be pretty important to my career going forward, which we'll get to that point later on. But that initial contact with him led me to going to the conference in Virginia in 2013 to work as kind of to just go and learn mostly, but also to interpret for Anatoly, which, as those who know, who went to that conference, was just a fucking mess. It was a disaster.
Now, to his defense, he tried really hard.
Oh,
and
geez.
I know, and it's hard. And it's, who's going to tell the most successful Olympic coach of all time? No.
Well, and that was the thing, bro. That was the thing, because like I never met him in person, Yeah. And I'm thinking this guy is like the best coach and athlete ever, in the history of sports. Like nobody has ever swept the Olympics, in 2 consecutive years, let alone 4.
Yeah.
In any sport besides this guy. And so I'm not going to go up there and be like, listen, asshole, like you need to speak English or speak Russian. So I'm not, but the thing is like, what's been great though is as we've worked together, like for how long has it been now, like 3 years, we went to San Antonio this year in January. I did the same, it was like the same thing, but no Yosef, like, so nobody to hold our hands. And the reason that it worked so well for us this year is that we learned from the mistakes in Virginia. So
great.
Going into that conference, it wasn't like that, but it was pretty close. Like I'm talking like the night before the conference, I'm like, hey, no English.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I came to Virginia in 2013, and I met Matt Tomey and Jeff Moyer, and um, got to speak a little bit of Russian with Dr. Solyanov, which was great. Got to talk with Val Nasedkin as well. Roman Fomin, Dr. Fomin was a great contact at that conference as well. And really that weekend in Virginia kind of kicked off my career, jump started my career in strength and conditioning. So if I can make a little plug here for the seminar, you won't find a better place to network. You just won't. Period. If you're a young coach listening to this, you have to go. Short of taking out like a title loan on your car to go, like you need to go. I've been to NSTA conferences from local, to the national coaches conference. You just don't network the way you network in Virginia. It's just a different environment. That's to say nothing of the content, which is also second to none.
Appreciate it.
So that first conference, well, it's true, man. I'm not the only one who says that. So that first conference was a big deal for me. And going forward, I came back to Portland, and shortly thereafter, my wife and I moved back to Salt Lake, where I'm from and where she's from. Shortly after the birth of my first son, his name is Lincoln. We came back to get a little family help with babysitting. And so I had a short hiatus there with strength and conditioning while I was trying to find a team to work with here. And then at the start of 2015, one of my other mentors, his name's Frank Wintrick, got a job at BYU as the head strength and conditioning coach for football when Jay Omer retired due to some health complications that had been kind of plaguing him for a long time. And so Frank got the job at BYU, and he actually asked me if I would come in and help him as like a volunteer. So Frank brought me on, and I really, I need to say that Frank was above and beyond in terms of being a mentor. Most strength coaches, they do their duty and they pass on the knowledge and the opportunity to the next up and comers, give them a chance to come in and work with the athletes. But Frank really, he really took me under his wing, brought me on early, and let me come right down to the ground level, short of being at his house, on the weekends. He would have me in on sessions planning the training, periodizing the programs, and I was nothing. I was an FNG.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a degree, I didn't have anything. And as far as he's concerned, we'd only talked on the phone a couple times. He brought me in, had me in on staff meetings, had me in on planning the training, letting me kind of give my input as to what I felt should happen with the training, which that just it doesn't happen for an intern. And so for me, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity again to see how things happen at the collegiate level and in Division I football at BYU. And so I worked for him for a full year for the whole 2015 season. He gave me the return missionary group and really gave me free reign to work with those guys under his guidance, which was a great experience to kind of cut my teeth with a group of guys and plan the training. And not that working for Mark wasn't a teeth cutting experience, but it's just not the same as being on a team.
Right.
And so working for Frank was great. And in the time I was at BYU, I had the opportunity to use Polar's Team 2 heart rate system and kind of familiarize myself with the dynamics of using that system. We actually got Catapult that season as well. And Frank was kind enough to put me in charge of that and give me the opportunity to work with the GPS as well. So we were able to use their software, which is a huge step up from Polar software. But I got the opportunity to work with that, and both those were great experiences. And after the 2015 season ended, Coach Wintrick with the rest of the Mendenhall staff went to Virginia, and I was still in school full time. So while I was working at BYU, I was driving 100 miles a day, round trip, to work at BYU in Provo and then go to class in Salt Lake. So that was a busy time for
I
me. A
bet.
lot of driving. But it's worth it when you get an opportunity like that. It's worth it 100%. And that year we published, I think maybe it was 2014, but
Mhm.
we were in the process of working out the bugs in the Olympian Manual, one of Anatoly's books, my first collaboration with him. And that book was it's tough when you've never published a book before to like get it right the first time. And, I think my collaboration with Joseph, that was kind of our like crucible to forge whether or not we were going to be able to work together in the future.
Mhm.
And we made a lot of mistakes on that book. And it helped us to kind of know better the process we should follow in order to improve. And when my experience at BYU ended, we published another book in this summer of 2016. So after that whole BYU staff left, I kind of turned my focus to finishing my undergrad degree, and finishing the book that we had started with Anatoly, his second book with me, which is that Soviet Methods title. We also, at the start of this year, went to San Antonio, like I was describing before, and Anatoly gave his first presentation lecture on a major stage. Not that Virginia is not a major stage, but at
Right.
least for the NSCA. I think there was like 500 people there watching him speak at the conference hall in San Antonio, which you wouldn't think that a guy who's competed at the Olympics and coached at the Olympics would get nervous, with a bunch of like American coaches that, according to him, in some cases could stand to learn a little more.
Yeah.
But
That's
yeah,
being
he was like
nice.
really,
Yeah.
but he was really nervous though. Like he was standing up there, and he was getting off his notes, and it was just cool. It was cool to work with him because he really wants to share what he knows, and he wants it to come across like clearly and in a way that coaches can apply it. And you can just tell that he cares, because if he didn't care, he wouldn't get nervous. He would just get up there and just be like, just kind of say a few words and leave. But he definitely was stoked about that thing, and it was a cool opportunity for me to get to work with him on that stage. And I always learn a lot from him anytime I get to meet him and talk to him. But that conference was pretty special. And I also, at that event, I got to meet one of my mentors. He doesn't know he's my mentor, at least he didn't before this. But it was Tom Myslinski, who's currently the head strength and conditioning coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He, back in the day when he was at Cleveland, he had published a couple of things about his system of training. And I was introduced to those by Mark back in 2012. And I just loved it. Like, I have all those slideshow presentations printed out, all marked up from reading them. And at that conference, I got to meet Milo, and it was huge. Like, we got done, and I was standing. I can't remember where I was at. I think I was at Landon Evans' presentation at the NSCA, and Coach Maslinski walks past me, and I'm like sitting on the chair, like trying to like look professional, and I'm like, holy shit, it's Milo. And he like, yeah. And he grabs me. He's like, "Hey, great job on Dr. Bondarchuk's presentation," and I'm like, "Oh, dude!" I'm like, so I stand up and we get to talk for a minute, and I was just like, trying to play the humble card, like, "Oh, thanks, we try so hard, and we're gonna do better next time or whatever." But I'm sure I sounded like a total idiot because I was like starstruck. And so, I mean, it's like guys like that. It's just nice, because there are a lot of egos in the field and guys who don't want to see young guys succeed. And I've had my fair share of those experiences, just like everyone else. And I think it's probably a good thing because it makes you want it more. But it's always nice, when someone like grabs you and kind of takes you under their wing. It just makes you appreciate that perspective that they offer. Especially when I've been reading about them for 4 years.
Yeah.
So it was cool to meet Milo, and so this year was a really cool experience, and getting to learn from him. And I think really one of the major influences on me in my coaching experience has been sports technology. Because working for Mark from day one, I was introduced to Omega Wave, and that was a staple, in that environment where we can control a lot of things that happen in the athlete's training. Being able to watch it and monitor it on Omega Wave was a huge part of the system. And so everywhere that I worked going forward, I tried to keep that technology focus or component there in my learning experience. And working with Catapult at BYU, I was able to work with. I went to the Catapult conference as a representative of BYU in I think it was the end of January of this year, which was kind of a trip because there's a lot of people there, and I was the only guy there who was a volunteer intern. You know, and so that's just another like shout out to Coach Wintrick and giving me my shot because you didn't have to do that. But I met Danny Van Dyke, who is currently an assistant strength and conditioning coach and data scientist for the Trojans for USC's football team. He's from Australia. He's a great resource, and he's been a big influence on my career in terms of being able to separate like the myth from the fact with data and with technology. Because a lot of times what you get is coaches will say, I want to know like how we can win based on what this machine tells me. Which the fact of the matter is the machine can't tell you anything. So the machine just tells you what it tells you. It tells you what some human programmed it to say. Mm-hmm. And that's something that Patrick Ward talks about a lot. But Danny, for me, he really drove that home. And he gave me some insights into how he operates with a big football program, and he's been very helpful in allowing me to bounce ideas off of him about how to apply different things, and going kind of with that in that train of thought with data and applying sports tech. Patrick Ward has been kind of a linchpin throughout every phase of my development as a coach. From the early days in 2012 or 2013, whenever he got there, just like teaching me how to deadlift. We have some videos of the instructional sessions that are pretty gruesome. So, but all the way through now, where if I want to perform a regression to determine, using R squared if some kind of metric applies to sport, I can call him up and be like, hey, check out this spreadsheet I made with the R squared equations, and he'll like run through it and give me advice, and so he's just a great dude, to be that like open to helping a young coach. Doesn't happen very often, and I think I could say that I don't know anybody else who's been as lucky as me to like have great coaches kind of help me out along the way, and there's no way I could have done it without all the people I've met. And and one guy on that list is Matt Tomey, who quite well. So I met Matt first at Virginia at the Richmond conference, and he was super cool. We talked training, and he was the head strength coach at Tech. At that point, he probably had just gotten there, right? Like, had just finished with you?
Probably, yeah, I was pretty close to that, yeah. Yeah, because I think he helped organize 2013. So, yeah, I think that was like his first year out.
Okay. And, yeah, he just is like, for anybody who knows Matt, he's just the most humble and the nicest guy you've ever met. But you would never, and he kind of comes off as unassuming, but he's super smart. Yes. Super smart, and the dude just gets results.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing you could say, because he just shows you that when it comes down to it, it's all about what you can do as a coach. You don't have to be all bravado and attitude to make champions. And so we first met in 2013, and we've kind of had an ongoing communication through Ultimate Athlete Concepts. He and Joseph and I have talked periodically about training and about books and things like that, and the system of training that he is using. And our collaboration kind of sped up this year when because when I was at BYU, I wasn't really training much.
Hmm.
My powerlifting kind of took a little bit of a back shelf position there for a while because I was driving so much. But when I wanted to get back in shape for powerlifting, started this year, I talked to Matt about using 1x20, the Yeses program that he's kind of been using with his football guys, and he and I have worked pretty closely together on that this whole year, and my powerlifting results have just been ridiculous on 1x20. And I compete in a non-drug tested federation, but I am a drug free athlete, which for a lot of guys would be like, oh yeah, prove it, piss test. I can do a piss test anytime and I'll pass it. And 1x20 works on anyone. Like, we're talking a guy, because I'm 27, I'll be 28 this coming year, which is still young by a lot of standards, but I'm not 21.
Yeah.
And my powerlifting total in single ply went up like 60 pounds in 6 months after a year of not training using 1x20, which is just stupid. Like, and my number of sessions doing singles was like less than 10 in
Oh,
in
wow.
like 6 months of training. So
Wow.
like, I'm not talking weeks, I'm talking sessions,
Yeah.
less than 10. And and that probably speaks to a couple things. Number one being that I was really out of shape. So that's, being what it is. But the fact when people say that high reps don't lend themselves well to making maximal strength gains, there's just nothing to support that. It doesn't support that at all. And I'm a coach for a powerlifting team that I started at the University of Utah. One of my athletes last weekend set 2 junior national records on 1x20 in single ply equipment after doing only the 1x20 like general prep phase. Like, there were no 8s, there were no 14s. It was just 20 with no powerlifting equipment on. So we're talking like nothing, even no weights above
Oh,
80%.
whoa, time out. All right, listen, I use it. I mean, a lot of people know me because of it. You're telling me that this kid didn't even put their gear on? Because there's
No,
no way you're squatting a 20 in gear. There's no way.
nah.
This
Most
cat
I've done in gear
didn't.
is
This
8.
this cat didn't have gear, and you're telling me they went in a squat suit?
And a bench shirt, which is even harder.
No, yeah, I know. That's
So,
crazy.
and the reason is that, and here's my, I don't know if this can be corroborated yet by, the type of experience that would scientifically prove it, but my theory is that sports mastery and powerlifting. But my theory is this: so in powerlifting, your ability to perform on the platform, especially in equipment like single ply, multiply, it directly corresponds to maintaining position, like under maximal weight. Guys who aren't as strong as other guys who have perfect technique, they're going to be able to finish on meet day better than guys who, don't practice their technical execution or whatever. And what 1x20 does is it puts you in so many exposures to the competition lift that you can't help but build good proficiency in performing the lift. And especially if you've done 1x20, and if just because you do high reps for bodybuilding or whatever doesn't mean you've done 1x20. It's a different deal.
Mhm.
And when you get to 20, like reps 15 to 20 at 300 plus pounds on squat, and it's your third session of the week doing that weight, like by 15 you're done. Like, you are feeling toast, but you still have to do 5 more reps. And being able to finish them corresponds to keeping your technique right. And I think what it does for powerlifters is, yeah, it's not maximal weight, but it's still maximal output. And it just shows up. Like, this kid, single ply, puts on his equipment 2 weeks before the meet, does like 1 or 2 sessions, you know, and he just crushes it. Hits a squat PR of like 35 pounds in his single ply, ties his bench PR, and then out deadlifts his old PR by like 20 pounds. Sets a national record in total. for the juniors.
It's awesome.
Drug-free lifter, guys. I mean, it's like a lot. I get that there's an ego trip about saying that your method works or whatever, even if you guys are on gear trying to cover it up. But first of all, it's not my method, so there's one thing. Second of all, it's powerlifting, and no offense to powerlifters, I am a powerlifter. Nobody cares about powerlifting. It's great, I love it, but nobody cares. Otherwise, we'd be making millions, and nobody does. So. I'm just being honest. Drug-free lifter using 1x20. He almost hit 100 pounds worth of PRs after never touching his equipment, just doing high reps. It works for maximal strength. It just does. So the federation was USPA. So if you have questions about depth or whatever, let that stand for itself.
Yeah, no doubt. So that's an interesting trip from Utah to Oregon and back. It's I think that this is an interesting voyage that a lot of people are going to take a lot from, and I think that the moral of all of it is do the right thing, keep your mind open, and keep on keeping on, man. And it comes back to, as Gary Vaynerchuk says all the time, you got to put in the work. And Jake, you're a cat that's done it, and I'm stoked that you're heading up to the UP to work with Tommy. Who will be on the docket for the 2017 seminar. Seats will be available soon.
Be there.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, bro. This is killer.
Thanks for having me on. I love it.
Yeah, brother. Well, we'll be in touch real soon, all right, buddy?
All right, Jay. Take it easy, brother.
You too. And a huge thanks to Jake Jensen for being so open and honest with us today, going through his whole background, his whole story. And again, guys, I mean, it's a unique situation. A kid who did a mission over in the Ukraine, learned Russian, is now translating works with Ultimate Athlete Concepts, helping Yosef out there. Interned under Mark McLaughlin, worked, under Patrick Ward, was at Portland State, was at BYU, and built a powerlifting team. All these things before he goes in as a GA. It's really awesome stuff, guys. And as always, guys, if you enjoyed the conversation, please share it through the social media outlet of your choice. Subscribe on iTunes and Podomatic. Make sure you're up to date with all the podcasts. Sign up for the newsletter on cvasps.com. And go ahead, shoot this out. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be. Just trying to share great information with all the great coaches out there. We appreciate everything you guys are doing for us here at Central Virginia Sport Performance. We will be back next week with another awesome guest. We will see you then.